Alice Eve. Star Trek's controversial Carol Marcus, actress explained in Star Trek Into Darkness. English actress Alice Eve plays a controversial version of Dear Carol Marcus in the Kelvin timeline of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies. Star Trek Into Darkness. Carol Marcus is a Starfleet physicist who specializes in weaponry and a potential love interest for Chris Pine's Captain James T. Kirk. To hide the connection between herself and Admiral Alexander Marcus, Peter Weller, who released Khan Noonien Singh, Benedict Cumberbatch, from stasis, Alice Eve's Carol Marcus goes by Carol Wallace when boarding the USS Enterprise. Star Trek Into Darkness isn't a direct remake of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, but instead reinterprets the prime timeline version of Carol Marcus, B.B. Besh, with a twist on her original concept. In Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, B.B. Besh's Dear Carol Marcus is a civilian scientist who works on developing the Genesis device to solve hunger and overpopulation in the United Federation of Planets. Carol is also the mother of David Marcus Merritt Buttrick, her son with Admiral James T. Kirk, William Shatner. There are few similarities between the two versions of Carol Marcus in Star Trek, but that is only the start of Star Trek Into Darkness's controversy. In Star Trek Into Darkness, Alice Eve played Dr. Carol Marcus, the daughter of Admiral Alexander Marcus, Peter Weller. Carol is a weapons scientist with an interest in a cache of experimental photon torpedoes that went missing from official Starfleet records. After tracing the torpedoes to the USS Enterprise, Dear Marcus finds the bodies of Khan's augment followers stowed in the torpedoes. By the end of Star Trek Into Darkness, Carol joins the crew of the USS Enterprise, but Carol Marcus isn't in Star Trek Beyond, suggesting Dear Marcus transferred off of the Enterprise in the intervening years. Alice Eve is no stranger to Sci-Fi roles, having also played a younger Agent O in Men in Black 3 prior to playing Dear Carol Marcus in Star Trek Into Darkness. Alice Eve's notable turns as romantic leads include Molly in 2010's She's Out of My League as the love interest to another character named Kirk, Jay Barrickle, and 2014's Before We Go, opposite Chris Evans. Alice Eve continues to work in film and television, with recent leading roles including Ann Calder in Haunting of the Queen Mary, 2023, and Cassie Holt in Cult Killer, 2024. Alice Eve's Carol Marcus was controversial because of the hypersexualized way that Dr. Marcus is portrayed in Star Trek Into Darkness. Rather than focusing on Dr. Marcus as an accomplished scientist, Star Trek Into Darkness views Carol Marcus through the lens of Chris Pine's more immature Captain Kirk, who is quick to objectify Carol. When Carol has to change out of her uniform, Carol asks Kirk not to peek. Instead of obliging her request, Kirk ogles Carol, and the camera pulls the audience along for the lingering looks at Dr. Marcus in her underwear. Star Trek has never really shied away from sexuality, so the bigger problem with Carol Marcus in Star Trek Into Darkness is with Carol's lack of agency. Carol Marcus is not defined as her own person, but who Carol is to men. Admiral Marcus's daughter, Khan's victim, or Jim Kirk's love interest. Encountering Kirk earlier in the Star Trek timeline means the bond between Carol and Jim isn't there, so the stakes aren't that high. Dr. Marcus doesn't have much to do in Star Trek Into Darkness, compared to the men in her company, but Alice Eve does the best she can with the material given. Alice Eve, a British actress with striking blue eyes and a sharp screen presence, made her mark on the Star Trek universe when she portrayed Dr. Carol Marcus in Star Trek Into Darkness, 2013, the second film of J.J. Abrams' rebooted Star Trek franchise. Her performance as Carol Marcus brought both excitement and controversy, sparking debates among fans and critics about her role in the film and the direction of the character within the larger Star Trek canon. Who is Carol Marcus in Star Trek? To understand Alice Eve's portrayal of Carol Marcus, it's important to first look at the character's background. Carol Marcus is a legacy character in the Star Trek universe, originally portrayed by B.B. Besh in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, 1982. In that film, Marcus is a brilliant scientist and the mother of Captain James T. Kirk's son, David. Her role is central to the storyline, as she and her team develop the Genesis device, a powerful technology with the ability to create or destroy life, becoming a crucial plot element in the showdown between Kirk and Khan. Carol Marcus in The Wrath of Khan was portrayed as a self-assured, intelligent woman, deeply devoted to her work and her son. She represented the personal sacrifices made by those who choose scientific discovery over personal relationships, and her complicated history with Kirk added layers to both characters. Alice Eve's Carol Marcus in Star Trek Into Darkness. In Star Trek Into Darkness, Alice Eve's version of Carol Marcus is introduced as a weapons expert who sneaks aboard the USS Enterprise under a false identity. Although her eventual reveal as Carol Marcus hints at the connection to Kirk from the original timeline, her role is not primarily defined by this relationship. Instead, she is positioned as a skilled scientist with her own motivations, involved in uncovering the mystery surrounding her father, Admiral Alexander Marcus, and the looming threat posed by Khan. While Eve's portrayal gave the character a youthful vitality and determination, the controversy stemmed less from her performance and more from a few particular scenes and how they reflected the film's treatment of female characters. The most notable example is the infamous undressing scene, where Carol Marcus is seen in her underwear while changing into a new uniform, a moment that was widely criticized as unnecessary and exploitative. The controversy surrounding Alice Eve's portrayal of Carol Marcus was largely focused on that one scene where she is shown disrobing in front of Captain Kirk without much narrative justification. The scene felt out of place in an otherwise action-heavy science fiction film and was perceived as gratuitous by many viewers. Critics and fans argued that it reduced a complex and capable character to a brief moment of objectification. Many pointed out that this scene didn't serve any real purpose in advancing the plot or deepening the character of Carol Marcus. Given that Star Trek as a franchise has often been praised for its progressive portrayal of women, this moment struck many as a step backward. It was seen as reinforcing outdated tropes about women in science fiction eye candy rather than fully realized characters. The backlash was significant enough that J.J. Abrams, the film's director, later admitted that the scene was unnecessary and that it detracted from the integrity of the character. He even acknowledged the critique during a talk show appearance, promising to balance it out by mentioning that a similar scene featuring Chris Pine's Kirk was cut, implying there was an intention to equally objectify the male and female leads. However, this reasoning didn't fully address the criticisms about how female characters were being portrayed in comparison to their male counterparts. Alice Eve's response: Alice Eve herself addressed the controversy surrounding the scene, stating in interviews that she didn't feel objectified or reduced by it. She argued that Carol Marcus's character was still shown as a competent, intelligent woman with agency throughout the film. However, Eve's comments did little to quell the larger debate about how women are portrayed in genre films, especially in franchises like Star Trek that have historically been seen as breaking barriers. In subsequent years, Eve has expressed pride in her role and has been vocal about her respect for the character of Carol Marcus, despite the backlash. For her, the character represented a young, passionate scientist with complex motivations who could stand on her own beyond her romantic or familial ties to Captain Kirk. Legacy of Alice Eve's Carol Marcus. Despite the controversy, Alice Eve's portrayal of Carol Marcus has left a lasting impression on Star Trek fans. While the character was not revisited in the third film, Star Trek Beyond, 2016, and remains absent from further entries in the franchise, her presence in Into Darkness highlighted both the strengths and pitfalls of reintroducing legacy characters into modern reboots.